Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is KingBlood 7, Sphinxes, Gargoyles, and Dragons. In this episode, we examine Maester Aemon's comment to Samwell Tarly that the Sphinx is the riddle, not the Riddler. I think this is presented to us as an obvious riddle, one we are invited to solve. Who and what are the Sphinxes that Aemon is talking about? Here's the quote in context. That had been one of his last good days. After that, the old man spent more time sleeping than awake, curled up beneath a pile of furs in the captain's cabin. Sometimes he would mutter in his sleep. When he woke, he'd call for Sam, insisting that he had to tell him something. But oft as not, he would have forgotten what he meant to say by the time Sam arrived. Even when he did recall, his talk was all a jumble. He spoke of dreams and never named the dreamer, of a glass candle that could not be lit, and eggs that would not hatch. He said the Sphinx was the riddle, not the Riddler, whatever that meant. He asked Sam to read for him from a book by Septim Barth, whose writings had been burned during the reign of Baelor the Blessed. Once he woke up weeping. The dragon must have 3 heads, he wailed, but I am too old and frail to be one of them. I should be with her, showing her the way, but my buddy has betrayed me. Now, on first read, I certainly was among those many readers who saw this and thought, no mystery here. We already know who the Sphinx is, Alleras, from the prologue. Sphinx is their nickname. Sam even goes on to meet Alleras, so we have our Sphinx, right? Well, maybe. Let's look a little closer. We've also learned from all over the fandom that people think Alleras is actually Sorella Sand, the hanger-on of the Sand Snakes. The one, from Ariane's POV anyway, who doesn't quite fit in, but always wants to be part of everything. I totally subscribe to the Alleras equals Sorella theory. Briefly, to recap it, here are the broad strokes of the theory. Alleras and Sorella are palindromes. Sorella is Alleras spelled backwards. Sorella matches the physical description we get of Alleras, especially noting how good-looking they are. Sorella, as a character, has a thirst for knowledge and an insatiable curiosity, and would be an exceedingly good student of the Citadel, but for her stated gender. One must note that good Queen Alysanne had asked the Archmaesters to start allowing girls, but unfortunately they totally ignored her. It is said that she loves Old Town. Sorella is said to be outside of Dorne. Old Town would be a fit for this. So Doran doesn't choose to even try to jail her with Oberyn's other children. And then most importantly, the only reason I can think that Doran would do such a thing is if Alleras equals Sorella was actively working for him already. Her working with an Archmaester of the Citadel and gathering intel for him would certainly fit. Of course, reporting it with that same glass candle we mentioned earlier. The nickname Sphinx matches Sorella equals Alleras because they are part Summer Islander, who wear feathered cloaks which sub in for wings, part Dornish and even part male, part female if the theory is right. I'm not sure if there's any more to this theory, but what I list here is enough for me. I think the Sorella is indeed Alleras. So, have we solved the riddle? Is Sorella our Sphinx? Well, no, I don't actually think so. Actually, Sorella is the Riddler Sphinx, in a bit of morbid humor by the author. You see, Archmaester Marwyn admits to spying on Sam and Aemon for quite some time before Sam's arrival in Old Town. I think that some of the dreams that Aemon was having during the trip on the Cinnamon Wind were affected by Marwyn and Alleras spying on him, dare I say pumping him for information, using their glass candle. So if Sorella was the one searching Aemon's subconscious mind for information, perhaps he thought of her querying his mind as a form of posing riddles. Certainly a morbid sort of riddle, more like a ransacking of his mind. This isn't The Hobbit. George R. R. Martin is a twisted man. Another way to examine it might be that Aemon started to notice the Sphinx in his head, and the riddle was posed by our Sphinx, Alleras, in order to confuse Aemon, enough to allow her to continue probing his mind without significant resistance. You see, with Aemon focused on the riddle Sphinx, he was not really considering the Riddler, who was continuing to probe his mind for those Targaryen secrets. Now that we've solved this, why the riddle was posed and by whom, I still must quench my curiosity about the answer to the riddle. and whether there is significance to their identity. So, then, who is the Sphinx, the Riddle? After considerable contemplation, I see only one other character that might fit the bill. I say a lot in this meme that you see here on the screen. I'll give you a moment to process it. As to the resurrection of Aemon part of the meme, that's a topic for another video. Although I'll mention that some time ago I posted about this on my blog and on Reddit, so perhaps I'll update that essay someday and make it into a video as well. The focus of the rest of this video is to support my assertion that Tyrion is such a Sphinx, and probably the one the Riddler had in mind for the answer to my riddle.
Let's note that Alleras actually has no reason to be posing riddles about Tyrion, and I'm not suggesting that she has this reason to. George R. R. Martin is ultimately our Riddler, and he, of course, loves Tyrion, so I don't doubt at all that he might throw in a weird riddle about him.
So, to start, let's look at some definitions from Britannica. Sphinx, a mythological creature with a lion's body and a human head, an important image in Egyptian and Greek art and legend. So, certainly the lion imagery makes us consider a Lannister for part of the answer to this riddle, so we're on the right track there with Tyrion. Then, in the next paragraph of the Britannica article, we see that a famous legendary Sphinx also had wings, bringing to mind a Targaryen. The winged Sphinx of Boeotian Thebes, the most famous in legend, was said to have terrorized the people by demanding an answer to a riddle taught to her by the Muses. One other thing to note is that Sphinxes, including the famous one above, are often female, but not always. So a Sphinx is a specific type of mythological creature that is a mix of man and beast. A more general term for mixed breed creature is chimera. Chimera has many definitions. Here's the first, again from Britannica. Chimera, in Greek mythology, a fire-breathing female monster resembling a lion in the forepart, a goat in the middle, and a dragon behind. She devastated Caria and Lycia until she was slain by Bellerophon. In art, the chimera is usually represented as a lion with a goat's head in the middle of its back and a tail that ends in a snake's head. So, again, we get the lion symbolism, though now in the head, versus the body of a sphinx. This time, though, instead of a human mixed with our lion, we get the head of a goat on the body. We also have more explicit dragon symbolism with the tail of the beast, although the definition certainly doesn't rule out wings. We must note, however, that George R. R. Martin never uses the term chimera in A Song of Ice and Fire. Why? Who can say? If I were to venture a guess, I would say that it's because he's hiding that he's using the other definitions and synonyms in his symbolism because he wants to keep their association masked and mysterious. We'll discuss two of those other definitions in the post, the first of which is from the next paragraphs of the same Britannica article. Chimera, or chimère in French, in architecture is a term loosely used for a grotesque, fantastic, or imaginary beast used in decoration. That brings to mind the most commonly used, or perhaps misused, term for architectural grotesques, gargoyle, again from Britannica. Gargoyle in architecture, waterspout designed to drain water from the parapet gutter. Originally, the term referred to only carved lions in classical cornices or terracotta spouts, such as those found in Roman structures at Pompeii. The word later became restricted mainly to the grotesque carved spouts of European Middle Ages. It is often, although incorrectly, applied to other grotesque beasts, such as the chimeras that decorate the parapets of the Notre Dame de Paris. Chimera is even a part of the definition here, so the association I have made between the two words is solid. George R. R. Martin certainly knows that they are used interchangeably in discussion of architecture, although he chooses, deliberately it would seem, to exclusively use grotesque and gargoyle in A Song of Ice and Fire. Further proving his knowledge, he even uses the jargon guardian gargoyles, which by definition specifically guard both sides of the entrance to a place, in this case, Dragonstone. Now, George R. R. Martin uses gargoyle a lot, both in the incorrect and the correct usages, it would seem. Mainly he uses it to describe grotesques at Dragonstone. There are 16 mentions of gargoyles and 3 of grotesques. And Winterfell, 25 mentions of gargoyles and 2 of grotesques. He also specifically compares Tyrion to a gargoyle 7 times, he who is also described as grotesque 7 times. It starts with the first usage of gargoyle in the series. Tyrion Lannister was sitting on the ledge above the door to the Great Hall, looking for all the world like a gargoyle. The dwarf grinned down at him. Is that animal a wolf? A Game of Thrones, Jon I. And then Cersei and Sansa's thoughts on him dominate the mentions of gargoyle and grotesque. From Sansa I in A Clash of Kings. In their midst, riding a tall red horse with a strange high saddle that cradled him in the back and front, was the Queen's dwarf brother, Tyrion Lannister, the one they called the Imp. He had let his beard grow to cover his pushed-in face, until it was a bristly tangle of yellow and black hair, coarse as wire. Down his back flowed a shadow-skin cloak, black fur striped with white. He held the reins in his left hand and carried his right arm in a white silk sling, but otherwise looked as grotesque as Sansa had remembered from when he had visited Winterfell. With his bulging brow and mismatched eyes, he was still the ugliest man she had ever chanced to look upon. And then, A Storm of Swords, Sansa III. When the moonstones hung from Sansa's ears and about her neck, the queen nodded. Yes, the gods have been kind to you, Sansa. You are a lovely girl. It seems almost obscene to squander such sweet innocence on that gargoyle. And then both words even come up in Tyrion's own POVs. Tyrion replied with a shrug, accentuated with a twist of his shoulders. Speaking for the grotesques, he said, I beg to differ. Death is so terribly final, while life is full of possibilities. Game of Thrones, Tyrion 1. That's when he's discussing Bran. And then from A Clash of Kings, Tyrion 5. Her look turned to disdain. You've conjured up every word of this in that grotesque head of yours, haven't you, imp? From A Dance with Dragons, Tyrion 8. And the sight of me can only be salt in her wound. They hacked off her brother's head in the hope that it was mine. Yet here I sit like some bloody gargoyle, offering empty consolations. If I were her, I'd want nothing more than to shove me into the sea. In a dream about climbing and fear of falling, Bran is tormented by grotesque lion gargoyles, which seem to represent his fear of Lannisters, associated with his subconscious knowing that Jaime threw him from the window. There was no way to go but up. Far above him, outlined against the vast pale moon, he thought he could see the shapes of gargoyles. His arms were sore and aching, but he dared not rest. He forced himself to climb faster. The gargoyles watched him ascend. Their eyes glowed red as hot coals in a brazier. Perhaps once they had been lions, but now they were twisted and grotesque. Bran could hear them whispering to each other in soft stone voices, terrible to hear. He must not listen, he told himself. He must not hear. So long as he did not hear them, he was safe. But when the gargoyles pulled themselves loose from the stone and padded down the side of the tower to where Bran clung, he knew he was not safe at all. I didn't hear, he wept as they came closer and closer. I didn't. In A Game of Thrones, Bran 4. That fear he feels then manifests in Summer's attack on Tyrion later in the chapter. It's clever that George R. Martin uses the attack to add Tyrion to the metaphor, which should only signify Jaime and Cersei. Finally, to drive it home, George R. Martin even has Cersei compare Tyrion directly to the gargoyles on Dragonstone, which are mostly dragons, if you recall. Your head may have glass eyes, but I do not. There are gargoyles on Dragonstone that look more like the imp than this creature. He's bald and twice my brother's age. What happened to his teeth? From A Feast for Crows, Cersei 8. So now that we've firmly established Tyrion as a gargoyle and grotesque, which also makes him a synonymous chimera, let's bring it back to whether he's a sphinx. Admittedly, there are no specific comparisons of him and a sphinx, although there is one scene he shares with a pair of Valyrian sphinxes. I'll tell you when I know. Schemes are like fruit. They require a certain ripening. Right now, I have a mind to ride through the streets and take the measure of this city. Tyrion rested his hand on the head of the Sphinx beside the door. One parting request. Kindly make certain that no harm comes to Sansa Stark. It would not do to lose both the daughters. These Valyrian Sphinxes in the small council chamber are mentioned 4 times in the first 2 books. After that, there is a dearth of Sphinxes in the text, until we are bombarded with discussion of Sphinxes in the A Feast for Crows prologue. The most important mention is here. It had been lazy Leo who dubbed Alleras the Sphinx. A sphinx is a bit of this, a bit of that. A human face, the body of a lion, the wings of a hawk. Alleras was the same. His father was a Dornishman, his mother a black-skinned summer islander. His own skin was dark as teak, and like the green marble sphinxes that flanked the citadel's main gate, Alleras had eyes of onyx. Now, of course, as a Summer Islander, Alleras gets her wings that way. While that mention of the wings of a hawk and another passage depicts Sphinx with the wings of an eagle by Sam Tarley, both scenes happen in Old Town, which potentially predates the Valyrian Empire. The 4 prior mentions, coupled with the 4 latter Sphinxes in Essos, from A Feast for Crows / A Dance with Dragon, are all Valyrian Sphinxes, 8 in total, and I have a feeling that those have the wings of a dragon. Although they are never described, so that's my assumption. Let's say I'm right, but still, the biggest problem in my theory is that Tyrion, while grotesque, is not a bit of this and a bit of that. Or is he? Yeah, I'm going there. Tyrion Targaryen. Please don't click away immediately, this won't take long. And even if you disagree, you may learn something new. Let's go back to the word chimera and its final definition. Chimera, in genetics, an organism or tissue that contains at least 2 different sets of DNA, most often originating from the fusion of as many different zygotes, fertilized eggs. That's from Britannica as well. This derivative definition of mythological origin is doubtless known by George R. R. Martin, given the existence of Maelys the Monstrous in Targaryen lore, who is notably also described as grotesque. I would also refer you to the terrific videos by SharksDen on the YouTube channel Septa Secrets. Tyrion displays many signs and has a lot of symbolism pointing to him being a genetic chimera. Chief among them is the phenomenon of his mismatched eyes, which can be an indication of tetragrammatic chimerism, where 2 zygotes fuse in the womb. Notably, Tyrion is not even the only character in the story with this exact condition. Alyssa Targaryen has very similar signs of this. Maelys is also a more grotesque version with more likely later fusion, where each twin is started to develop, yielding the 2 heads. I cover these issues more in my video about hints of A Song of Ice and Fire in Elden Ring, by the way. In Septa Secrets video, Sir Stefan makes a terrific case for Tyrion being an even more specific type of chimera. One where one of the zygotes was male and 1 egg was female, so there would be fraternal twins fused. In his video, he makes the case that the female egg is the child of Joanna and Aerys II Targaryen, and the male egg is the child of Tywin and Joanna Lannister. I won't go into detail, but here's a list of his other evidence. Tyrion's different colored eyes, Maelys and his 2 skulls, and the comparison to Kuatu in the blockbuster Schwarzenegger movie Total Recall, the short story it was based upon, having been published in a magazine that George R. R. Martin has also published. Tyrion's wonders about what it would be to have a twin. Tyrion being a chimera in the Greek sense as well, a lion and a dragon. Twins having different dads happens sometimes in real life and in Greek mythology, i.e. the Gemini twins. The name Bran and Lollies give their baby, Tyrion, him of 100 fathers. The myth about Tyrion told to him by Oberyn, which perfectly matches the description of a chimera, and possibly even a sphinx. Tyrion might have the genetics of a Targaryen dragon rider, which of course is implied by his fascination with dragons. So that's a good tie-in as well. I would add one more thing that points to him possibly being a Targaryen: his dragon dreams early in life and his fascination with dragons. In any case, I think Sir Stefan hits the mark with his video. I'll link to it in the description and in a card. He has several other related videos as well. Check them out after you finish mine. One last thing, to those who think this theory somehow ruins Tyrion and Tywin's relationship. I can only disagree. If Sir Stefan and I, and Preston Jacobs, and others before us, are right, well, when Tyrion states that all dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes, he's half right. The female Targaryen half of him is technically a bastard. That said, Tyrion, the male part of him, is his father's trueborn son. How Tywin treats him as otherwise is still the major dynamic in their relationship, and nothing about this theory contradicts or affects that. Tyrion is his son. Tywin's actions are still unforgivable and completely wrong. This in no way gives him cover for being a bad actor. So, anyway, I think I have presented a good case for Tyrion being the answer to the riddle. What is the implication of this? I think we'll have to keep reading. Soon, I hope, we'll find out. But I will offer one idea. If we return to the original quote, right after Aemon said, "The Sphinx is the riddle, not the Riddler," he pivots to talking about Septon Barth's writings. Could this be a clue? Is the riddle about a dragon or dragonkind? The next sentence George R. R. Martin has Aemon say is, "The dragon must have 3 heads." To me, that solidifies it a bit. This riddle Sphinx probably has something to do with the 3rd head of the dragon. While it's unlikely he'll ever get to ride a dragon, although he is on a battlefield with 2 of them at the moment, so maybe he will. Perhaps Tyrion would be the 3rd head of Daenerys' 3-headed dragon, along with Jon Snow. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think there's foreshadowing in the text for what all this means? I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks to all the terrific artists whose work is featured on this video.
Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.